His nickname might be Goldie, and sure, that might be a play off of his last name, David Goldstein, but he truly is the gold standard when it comes to visual sports content and storytelling. He works with so many different networks and does it as owner producer of Golo Productions and working with all of these different networks. It would be so fun to have him on, which we are going to do on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, working with different networks myself, and having David on here today in our conversation. Think of it as like a film room conversation where, say, one of us is the football coach. In this sense, it would be me, and David is a football player, and we're analyzing his life like a football coach would analyze the play, the X's and O's of his own players, except we're going to do that beyond just the realm of David's work. We're going to look at his life overall and get to know the human side of him too. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. Here is my chat with David. David, so excited to have you on, and thanks so much for doing this.
Of course, Brian. Really, thanks for inviting me. And I've seen some of your stuff before, so I was honored to be asked. I really appreciate you asking me on.
What is it like playing a round of golf with you?
Let's see. I talk a lot. I don't know, I'm definitely the talker in the group. I'm sort of the planner of our golf group too. I've got about 7 or 8 guys that we play with here in Atlanta. And it was funny, actually. I was playing on Friday of last week, and playing with 2 guys. And my one, we're walking down the fairway, and my one friend says, "How do you know David?" He goes, "Oh, we met at Fetch Dog Park, which is a dog park here, nearby." And the other guy goes, "Oh, he and his wife met us at a bar." So it's like I always meet strangers and put them together, and that sort of like collects our golf group. So I'm kind of like the, what do you call it? The connector that sort of connects everybody. But that's sort of what it is like playing around with me. Talk a lot. Not too much. I have good etiquette, I guess, but I'm usually the short knocker in the group, usually about 220 yards, 230 off the tee, but always in the fairway.
Always in the fairway.
That's my thing is always be in the fairway, or at least don't hit it too far offline so you can stay in the hole. But I'm about a bogey golfer. I carry a 12 handicap, something like that.
That outward personality, I feel like, just describes you so well and fits so well with the industry that you're in. Not saying this happens very often, especially on the golf course for you, David, when you get in a bunker, because we know that your game is suited for avoiding those. But
Sure.
let's just say when life throws you into one of its own bunkers, what is your way of getting out?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think that whether it's in golf or work or whatever you're trying to do, I think that, you know, trying to look at the problem as a step-by-step situation, not letting the problem overwhelm you. You can only do, it's cliche, but you can only accomplish one task at a time. So if you get in a hole where you're like, man, I'm swamped on this project and we got 20 things to do, and 18 of them are really intimidating or daunting, don't you can't worry about all that. All you can do is take one step at a time. And we always joke that when you're on a shoot, there's going to be a problem. Nothing ever goes perfect. So you have to at least know, like, hey, this is not going to, you can do all the planning in the world, but it's never going to go as planned. It's never going to be perfect. So just, tackle one problem at a time, or, I guess to make the golf metaphor, just get it out and then worry about the next shot after that.
When things come your way, especially when you're putting something together and shooting that is unplanned, how have you been able to tap into the beauty of that? Because maybe you go into a project and you're like, okay, we're going to shoot it this way. And then something happens that you didn't expect, but it actually makes the piece that much better. How have you been able to harness those moments in your content creation?
Well, it's funny. Actually, I'm wearing an Augusta Green Jackets hat. I have a story. So last year we worked on a show, America's Caddy, and I was the showrunner of the show. Michael Collins was our host. He was fantastic, and we were in Augusta shooting our Masters episode. And just because we're in Augusta shooting a Masters episode does not mean we get to go to Augusta National and shoot all this stuff on the golf course. So we're doing things around Augusta. And I can't remember what our original cold open was. We were going to do something with a local artist. The cold open is sort of like a 60-second kind of funny skit that would get us into the episode. And so we've done all this planning to shoot this cold open, and we've written a script, and we've had it approved by our wonderful clients at ESPN Plus. And, so it's the day before the shoot, and something fell through with the artist and we couldn't do it. So we had literally 20 minutes before driven by the Augusta Green Jackets minor league baseball field. And I was like, it would be great. I was like, the park looks perfect. Maybe we could figure out a way to shoot our cold open there. So we turn the car around, literally pull up to the stadium and say, hey, we're with ESPN Plus. We explain the show. Is there a way we could speak to someone in marketing? And sure enough, they got us in touch with somebody at marketing, and actually Allison Schwartz. So shout out to Allison Schwartz for kind of helping us out and for the free hat. But we ended up scrapping our previous idea. Our host Michael was so great that he was a stand-up comedian prior to being a host of our show, and prior to him being a caddy. So we had the marketing folks bring out the Augusta Green Jacket mascot, put him at home plate, and Michael just told him a bunch of jokes that the mascot would react or not react, and it ended up being a really funny bit. And it was one of these things where it wasn't planned, it wasn't scripted, but we made the best of the situation, and it ended up being so much better than the bit that we had originally written. So you just kind of come up with an idea, and if it doesn't work, just kind of react on the fly, scrap it, and so it always works out, right? It's always going to work out. It may never work out as you planned, but it always works out.
It always works out when you think about your career and your life and the steps that you've made. You mentioned just a moment right there where something beautiful happened that went off script. How about when you had thoughts about where you were going, you mentally had scripted out, okay, I'm going to go this way, but then life happens and you end up going off script, where sort of like your way of adapting on the fly when it came to Augusta. Have you been able to do that as well, where you've been able to channel in your own abilities in your own life to act off script?
Yeah, it's funny. I guess maybe like my position in the industry, in the sports television industry, growing up as a kid, like, I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, but I was really into WGN baseball, Harry Carey. I grew up on Harry Carey. And so before I even knew what a Budweiser was, I was a Cub fan, Bud man, and I used to turn down the sound and pretend I was Harry Carey and, call games. And so I thought I wanted to be like you, a play-by-play guy on the air, and that's what I wanted to do. And so that was sort of my career path that I wanted as a kid, and, late into my teenage years and even early in my college years. But, life kind of took me in a different way. And I volunteered as a production assistant runner and at Fox Sports in Colorado for the Colorado Rockies. And I was a behind the scenes guy. I was in the truck, as a PA, running to get coffee, doing things in the truck. And I kind of fell in love with that side of it. And, I had no previous experience other than turning down the sound and calling games to myself in the, play-by-play world. But by sitting in that television truck, I gained experience of what it meant to be behind the scenes, right? And so I guess, I had always planned out my life one way, but then it turned out a different way. And that's, kind of, I stuck with that path ever since. I was lucky enough out of college, I got a job at HBO Sports. And I had kind of like the live background because I've been sitting in a TV truck doing baseball games. But I was really lucky to get into the feature world, worked on Real Sports and Costas Now, and got to see how longer form stories come together and that sort of thing. So I fell in love with that avenue of the business. So I guess, I always planned to do one thing in the business and I end up doing something totally different. So I guess maybe that answers your question.
Yeah.
I was off script. I don't know.
Yeah, it does. David Goldstein is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. The idea for you in working a lot behind the scenes, But what do you wish that what you do behind the scenes would be more in front of the camera as far as what people knew about what you did and it wasn't so hidden or kept secret or not common knowledge?
You know what's funny is like I started in this business, and when I first started working, especially at HBO Sports, we would roll credits, whether it was the Costas Now or HBO or Real Sports or Inside the NFL, they would roll credits. And my mom or somebody at home would always like pause the credits and take a picture, right? And as we've gone, certainly on the path doing a lot of ESPN stuff and NFL Network and all the features, we stopped doing credits. I mean, every once in a while I'll work on a documentary or something that has credits, but it's rare. And I don't know. In the beginning of my career, I was always like, man, I want people to know that I worked on that. But as I've gotten later in life, it's almost like I'm happier that our team that actually worked on, whether it be a film or a feature or a broadcast, like as long as everyone else on that broadcast knows what you did and knows how it all came together and that you were a part of the team, to me it's, I mean, I know it sounds kind of like cliche or silly, but to me that's way more important than everyone else knowing, what you did. That as long as the core team that worked on it knows what you did and how you contributed to the project, to me that's the most fulfilling part of the job and the business. I mean, sure, it'd be, it's fun every once in a while when I'm working a Thursday night football game and we walk a player out and I happen to get on the steady cam shot or something, and people are pausing and saying, oh, look who I saw on TV. Of course those little moments are fun or funny. But yeah, I mean, to me, after I sort of took the path of being behind the camera and behind the scenes, you know, uh, that's for people like you to be on the camera. Our job is to make you look good and make the broadcast look good.
Well, this is about making you look good. And this is about you, which is so amazing. What I love about this conversation, and David Goldstein is with me, I'm Bryan Fenley, is the idea that there are amazing, so talented people in our industry that deserve the recognition of being in front of the camera at all times, like yourself. And so just being a little humble part of being able to tell people more about what you do, and not just from a work standpoint, but I want to learn as well about like you growing up. So obviously you had the mimicking of Harry Carey's voice down, I'm sure, when you turned down the television. But what was your childhood like, even before you got to college and you were in Colorado and you were a Buffalo and then you started the internship, but you just as a child, the snapshot of what that
Sure.
was.
Sure. So I've always been a sports nut and a sports junkie, even as a kid. So in addition to the WGN and watching Harry Carey and watching baseball and knowing every stat of Andre Dawson and Ryan Sandberg, I could tell you their batting average, how many home runs they had, all kinds of stuff, especially, NBA, Major League Baseball, all of it. I played every sport I could get my hands on. I loved baseball and basketball growing up. The only problem, and I was actually really good until about age 12, 13. The only problem, I love the game. I was actually a really good, played, I was like always I was the kid that was always on the all-star team in baseball and basketball until age 12 or 13, because everybody else grew and I stayed the same size.
Uh-huh.
So about 13, 14, I started to realize once the field got bigger, I couldn't hit the ball out of the infield, right? And in basketball, once everybody shot up to 5'7", 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", 6, I was still stuck there at 5'6", and I wasn't that big as a kid. Now I'm about 5'7" maybe, but it's everybody got bigger and I stayed the same size. So baseball and basketball were my two sports growing up. I had to stop those at about 13, 14, as I mentioned. I got into soccer a little bit. So I played on our soccer team, junior high, high school. And then my last 2 years of high school, I played on the golf team. And I was really not into golf. I mean, I work in golf now. I'm obsessed with golf. I play probably twice a week if I can, if not more. And if I'm busy, sometimes less. But my grandfather was a great golfer. I mean, an amazing golfer, state amateur player in Alabama. Loved the game. And he would always try and convince me to go play with him. And I'd say, nah, Pop, nah, I don't want to play golf. That's for nerds, man. Like, I want to play baseball and basketball. He's like, I'm telling you, you're going to like golf. No, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Well, I think it was 1996, probably. I think that's when Tiger won. Is either 96 or 95. Whenever Tiger Woods won his third amateur of USAM event, I was watching the broadcast on TV at home, and I must have been 14, 15 at the time. I was born in 82. Um, and Tiger was way down in the match. I still remember this. Tiger's way down in the match, and he comes back, like only Tiger Woods can. He's probably 4 down with 5 to go or something crazy like that. And he wins the last 4 or 5 holes. And I remember he's wearing this big brim hat. And he's got this, rugby stripe polo on. But I just remember watching him play golf, and he has this huge fist pump to win the match. I was like, whoa, golf is cool. So then the next day I called my grandfather. I'm like, hey, Pop, I think I will go to Pine Tree Country Club is where he used to play out of in Birmingham. I said, I think I will go to Pine Tree with you tomorrow, if that's okay. And so he took me to play golf when I was like 14 or 15. And I kind of fell in love with it, and have had the bug ever since. So always into sports. Never really golf until about 14 or 15, but it was always sports. Always sports. Always had a ball in my hand. It was either always playing it or watching it, consuming it. And just love I love the game, love all the games really, but just love sports, and grew up loving it, and still to this day I probably watch way too much. If I'm not working a sporting event, I'm watching one.
What about those conversations with your grandfather do you miss the most?
Oh man. Everything. So he passed away about maybe 6 months prior to my wedding. So he was never at my wedding. Uh, you know, but I used to, I was probably working for about 10 years when he was still alive. And I would call him, after working a Thursday night football game or college football or all these things that he knew I grew up loving, right? I'd tell him, "Oh, Pop, I was working the NFL Hall of Fame ceremony, and Peyton Manning was there, or Dan Marino, or all these people that he knew." And so, just being able to share those stories with him and letting him kind of like live through my travels a little bit is something I really miss. And then he lived his last. He and my grandmother lived their last few years. Grandmother's still alive, but when he was still alive, they lived in West Palm Beach. And when I was living in New York City, I would take my vacations to West Palm Beach just to play golf with them. And people, I'm in my early 20s, and people are going all these exotic places, and I'm going to Palm Beach to play golf with my grandparents. That was kind of my thing.
What does that say about you, David, as an old soul and someone who really appreciates those that are more senior, in that you yourself, even at that young 20-year-old age, you had a lot more seemingly life experience to really understand and grasp those around you that were older than maybe your age indicated?
Sure, it's funny. Yeah, I mean, if you ask my wife, I'm like, 40 going on 60, just because I got so many
Yeah.
complaints about my knee and my back and or whatever. But no, I don't know. I've always gotten along with older people. I we talked about earlier, never meeting a stranger when you play golf. Like I love being paired up with, older going out as a single, and
Yeah.
playing with random older people and hearing their story, because it's so interesting. Like they have so much knowledge, and they've experienced so much more than we have. I'm sure Bryan, you and I are probably around the same age. And it's funny, we kind of live in that we've been able to live in the pre-internet, when we would have to go to the library and still
Sure.
look things up using the Dewey Decimal System, or having to find things on old newspaper reels and that kind of thing. And then we're now in this world of technology and social media, and everything's on the internet, and we can literally have every answer we ever want right here on our phones,
Yeah.
you know. And so I think we've been fortunate to experience both. But I mean, the people that came 20 years before us that experienced even, they have just a totally different outlook in life, and maybe um they're more, more grateful for what they have and what we have now. And I don't know, it's just interesting to get all different perspectives. And I think there's so much inherent knowledge that people who have much more experience than you have, and you can really learn from those people. And you know, hopefully they kind of like give you a new perspective, or something that you don't have just because they have more experience than you, you know.
What was the perspective on life that you didn't have until you met your wife?
Well, so I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, and she's from Long Island, New York. And I guess, you know, many different experiences, but people from New York, even though I lived there for 5 or 6 years after college, you forget how straightforward and frank they can be, and honest. And we're in the South, it's like, oh, everything's great. They may talk about you behind your back, but to your face, everything's great. You're just so sweet and bless your heart. So she kind of taught me how to be a little more straightforward, a little more blunt, and not pull punches and just say what you feel, and have hard conversations when you need to. So I would say that's sort of the yin and yang between the two of us. And one of the things that she gave to me, or a gift that she gave to me, was just be more honest, just say what you feel.
How do you lift her up? Like you said, she lifts you up.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we both have our own businesses and work for ourselves. And we've had a nice sort of yin and yang of, if she's busy and I'm not busy, I'm doing more around the house, I'm helping out, doing more with the dog, doing more with the family, and vice versa. If I'm really busy at work and traveling all the time, then she picks up the slack a little bit. So we pick each other up that way. And then I think just supporting each other. She's had 3 or 4 different careers since we've been together, or career changes, and they've all been for the better. But at times, one of us, if she's out of work for a minute, or things aren't going well, just being there for him, for her, and supporting her, and loving her no matter what. That's what marriage is like. You support each other and support each other's decisions, and help each other out. And I feel like we truly, go back to the fact that, I love sports, and love team sports, and we're a team, and we have to support each other, and, pick up the slack when one's down. You still got to carry the torch for the team. And I think we do a good job of that together.
When you carried the ring for the team, when you proposed, what was that like?
Oh man. So there's a little pedestrian path in Atlanta called the Atlanta Beltline. And there's all kinds of like artwork on there, and local artists. And now there's so many apartments and bars and restaurants. But when we were first living on the Atlanta Beltline, there wasn't much. There's a lot of local art, and it was a pedestrian path that connected a bunch of neighborhoods. And we love to walk. I mean, we walk together probably at least 10,000 steps a day. We got to get our 10,000 steps a day in, but we walk together all the time. We walk the dog. We just love walking. And so one morning, we were going to walk the Atlanta Beltline, and there was a art exhibit called "What Ties Us Together," and you could write, people from all over Atlanta. You'd write things. So whether were a 60-year-old person like we talked about earlier, or a 20-year-old, you'd write a little message, and it kind of all come together how you all were tied together as someone who lived in Atlanta and supported the community. So that morning, it was a weekend morning, I was going to take a walk. We were going to walk to the "What Ties Us Together" little exhibit. And I had written out, "Will you marry me?" on one of the ribbons. So that was my plan, right? And we had gone out the night before or something. The weather wasn't great. I'm like, "Hey, let's go on a walk on the Beltline." She's like, "Do we have to? Like, the weather kind of stinks. Can we just go later?" I'm like, "No, no, no. We need to go now." Really? So like finally I convinced her to go out on our walk in the Atlanta Beltline. I took her to the "What Ties Us Together" exhibit, and I was like, "Oh, come look at this ribbon. This one's interesting." And I had written "Will you marry me?" And so she reads the ribbon and I'm standing right there with the ring. So that's how I proposed to her. And
Wow.
nothing fancy, but it was still, I guess, meaningful and memorable to this day. It was something that, we like to do, kind of, nothing fancy, but just what we like to do every day, take a walk.
It's the little things, especially
Yeah.
when it's shared time together like that. It doesn't have to be something extravagant. It's just the thought process of you in being there and putting in that effort, which you did just at that very moment, which meant so much to her. I want to leave you with this, David. Beyond that, in proposing, and certainly that is something that can take courage. What is the most courageous thing you've ever done?
Oh, Bryan, I don't know. Man, that's a good question. Man, I don't know. I look at like my career and my life, and I think about so many other people that do things that are so much more courageous, whether it be a firefighter or somebody that goes out and fights for our freedom every day in our military. And, I don't know that there's something that I'm sure maybe if you ask my wife or someone in my family, maybe there's something courageous that I've done. I mean, I think one of the hardest things I had to do that did take a lot of courage was, as we talked about, my grandfather was kind of like my best friend and my buddy. And, when he passed away, I'm one of seven or eight grandkids on my mom's side. And so I sort of spoke for the whole family. Um, or all of the grandkids at his funeral, and that was really tough, but it was something that I wanted to do. I didn't want to stand up there and cry and snivel the whole time and all that kind of stuff. So I got through whatever it was, 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes of my speech without crying. So I guess that's one of the more courageous things I've done. I think maybe if I had time to think about it, I could come up with one or two others, but I don't know. I think there's so many more people out there that are, have real life jobs that take a lot more courage than, sitting behind a camera and telling a story or telling a feature story or a documentary or whatever. So I think there's definitely, people out there much more courageous than I am.
What did you say about him at that moment?
Oh man, just I guess that, to sum it up, he had never really met a stranger, and he made a point to make everybody he interacted with feel special, whether it be the clerk at the CVS or, the guy grabbing his golf bag or whatever it was. And I think that's something that he passed down to me. And one of the things that I had the hardest time when I lived in New York City was, you know, growing up in a small town, you feel like you never met a stranger and you want to have conversation with them, whether it's the clerk at CVS ringing you up or, the person at the grocery store or whatever. And so when I lived in New York, it was like, man, nobody's talking to each other. You're like on this, there's millions of people, but you're on the subway all by yourself. And like, even though you're surrounded by people, you feel very alone and lonely. And so that was kind of, I don't know, that was a thing that he sort of passed down to me, is like, I want to talk to every stranger. And so when strangers aren't talking to each other, that was always weird to me. And I guess when I knew it was time for me to leave New York City was when I stopped saying hello to the clerk at the Dwayne Reed or stopped making conversation with the barista at Starbucks or whatever it was. I was like, you know what? I don't like this. Like, this is not how I grew up. It's not who I am. And not that it's a bad thing. It's just not who I am. So like, that's one of the things that he passed down to me. And one of the things that I tried to convey in that speech was like, small, tiny conversations with people can go a really
Yeah.
long way, or, be really big for somebody that you didn't know it was going to be, right? Like something that may seem very small to you could mean a lot to somebody else.
Well, David, you are and you never were alone because your grandfather's spirit was around you at all times, and it's so beautiful to hear how his influence runs through you through this day. And we talked about one of the first things we said in this conversation was how much of an outward personality you are, and you love to talk. And now seeing where all that comes from makes this conversation go full circle. And hey, you survived this without crying as well.
Oh man, Bryan, I feel like I rambled on. Part of my personality, I guess, but
Not at all.
I said I had seen a lot of your stuff, but I for some reason thought we were going to come in and talk a lot of sports and a lot of TV, and we didn't. And it was really refreshing to do
Yeah.
so. I really appreciate you having me on and sort of exploring a different part of my brain and part of my life that I probably don't explore enough. So you're a fantastic interviewer, and I really appreciate you, sitting down with me. It was great.
You made it wonderful based upon the way you were able to look inside and give us a look at your soul. And thanks for going down that road with me. And yeah, I love the human element. I love the meaningful conversations where there's nothing superficial here. We discuss life in a beautiful way. And it's really cool to see where all of your inspirations come from. David Goldstein with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. David, of course, is owner, producer, director at Golo Productions. Go check out his work. He's always doing something. Thanks so much, David. This was great.
Thanks, Brian. Really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.